Good morning. Welcome to this Apex and Ben Americas webinar on infrastructure opportunities in Brazil. My name is Cesar Iliano, and I am the content director for Ben Americas. I want to thank you all for participating in this event, which will bring key insights for investors in the infrastructure industry in Brazil. In the first part of the webinar, we will be listening to Alberto Neto, Head of Investments at Apex Brazil, and two keynote presentations by Rafael Furtado, Director of Promotion and Development of Infrastructure at the Ministry of Infrastructure, and also Fabio Abrão, Director of Concessions and Privatizations at Development Bank BNDES. After that, Ben Americas Bureau Chief Rogerio Schellmayer will be moderating a panel with executives from 5 companies and institutions. These companies the speakers will be Yaroslav Memrava, New Business Director of Aegea, Pablo Sorge, Partner at Mattos Filho, Carlos Leiria Pinto, Head of IFC in Brazil, Roberto Figueiredo Guimarães, Planning and Economy Director at the Brazilian Association of Infrastructure and Basic Industries, and Felipe Pinto, Partner and Head of Infrastructure for Brazil at Patria Investments. So let's get started with Alberto. Please open your camera and microphone. I will be showing your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. My name is Adalberto Neto. I'm the Chief Investment Officer of Apex Brazil. Apex Brazil is the trade and investment promotion agency of Brazil. We have 14 offices around the world, and infrastructure is one of the key sectors we are promoting worldwide to attract investment and present opportunities that Brazil has to offer. Next, please. So important to remember some things about Brazil. Brazil is the 30th largest economy of Brazil, of the world, the 6th largest population, and the top 8 destination of FDI in 2020 with $34 billion. We can go to the next slide, please. Well, a little introduction on what Apex do. We help companies to establish in Brazil. We support auctions and concessions, all the information, the programs and the opportunities there. We help foreign companies to find partners in Brazil and also to arrange top-level meetings with decision makers in the government. Next, please. Well, here is a quick view of our offices. Aside of the 14 offices, we have 120 trade points from our trade promotion network from the Brazilian embassies that work continuously with Apex. Next, please. Well, what have we done so far in infrastructure? We had 35 investment facilitated, 179 companies supported, 52 programs and initiatives in all the continents in terms of promotion, and more than 15,000 jobs created. Last but not least, it's important to remember the infrastructure portfolio is really wide from Brazil, and we had been really in the top ranks in terms of opportunities, and we are very happy to have BN Americas as a partner to promote and present these opportunities. Next, please. So a recent success we had was the Bravo model that creates a integrated value chain in terms of lithium batteries and electric vehicles. Alone, an investment of $3.5 billion and 7,000 jobs created. But talking a little bit about the assets that will be involved in the overall infrastructure market in Brazil, we're gonna have, we had from 2019 to 2021, 113 assets that had been auctioned in ports, airports, railways, roads, even parks, hospitals, prisons, mining rights. So Brazil has today the largest portfolio in terms of infrastructure opportunities. And that means $24 billion in grants and $106 billion in investment. As summary for what's coming next in terms of 2022, We can even see a total amount of in 2022 of 156 projects in the pipeline, being 26 airports, 30 ports, 9 roads, 4 railways, and 14 parks and forests. We're expecting additional, just this year, $65 billion in investment from these auctions. Anyway, this is just an intro to present Apex as your one-stop shop and solution provider for infrastructure. Next slide, please. Infrastructure in Brazil. And we are here to help you to understand the opportunities, connect with the decision makers, translate in terms of cases, and also manage the timeline for these auctions and concessions. We wish everybody a great and very productive webinar today. Thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you very much, Alberto. Let me now please introduce Rafael Furtado, as I mentioned before, Director of Promotion and Development of Infrastructure at the Ministry of Infrastructure, who holds a key position at this moment of the investment cycle for Brazil. So, Rafael, I'll leave it with you.
Thank you very much, Cesar, for the invitation from BN Americas and also from Apex. It's a pleasant morning here in Brazil, and we're gonna have a great time and an opportunity to talk to you about our projects that we are taking on here. First of all, there's no doubt about the need for investments that we have here in Brazil, and also the gap of infrastructure that we have, and also the need to narrow this gap in infrastructure. And for that reason, we cannot only rely only on the public budget, and so we must have public investments to sum up with the public ones. And Brazil has chosen the path to establish partnerships with the private sector, sending this for that reason a clear message toward developing the greatest pipeline of PPP in the world, like as Roberto has said, and including not only transport sector, but also a broad diversity of brownfield and greenfield projects in the sector, as sectors as oil and gas, energy, sanitation, health, national parks, and so on. And what makes anyone believe that it is possible to do that? I would answer with the results that we have already. But before talking about those results, and to have a better dialogue with the sector, with the private sector, Brazil and the Ministry of Infrastructure is working very hard on the commitments to investors, including a strengthening the regulatory and more sophisticated project structuring, constantly improving regulatory framework to provide more visibility, efficiency, and predictability, incorporating the international best practices in project structuring. We can also talk about the strategic action with public works, completing unfinished works. Public works is important to induce development and a greater efficiency in national transport matrix. We are actively work with concessions that face problems. That is a reality. And this work to help find resolutions with concessions facing difficulties in complying with contractual obligations, primarily due to problems in modeling. And we have now a robust pipeline with concessions, authorizations, and privatizations. That means a massive transfer of infrastructure assets to the private sector to quickly reduce the infrastructure gap and bring more efficiencies and technology to the sector of transport. And the results that we have from the last years, especially from 2019 and 2021, is that we have transferred 81 assets to the private sector, including 34 airports, 35 leased terminals, ports inside public ports, 6 railways, and other 6 toll roads, and including investments for over 90 billion of reais in the last years. And we've done that with assistance and experience of international institutions like IFC, also with the help and assistance of EPL, it's a public entity in Brazil, BNDES, and the collaboration of IDB, CAF, and it was made possible for those projects to go on, and there are more to come. I'd like also to talk a little bit about the next projects that we have in 2022. We are planning about 55 assets in this year of 2022, which are in the seventh round of concessions of airports, 17 airports, and also the lease of 26 terminals in public ports, one concession for 1 canal, and 4 ports, including the concessions of the port of São Sebastião, the port of Itajaí, and like I said, the canal of Paranaguá, and the privatization of the port of Espírito Santo, the public company that administrates the port of Espírito Santo, and also the port of Santos. And 3 concessions, 3 renovations, actually 2 renovations of railways, and 1 concession, which is Ferrogrão. It's a very great, it's a very important concession of railroad in Brazil, and 14 concessions of toll roads. So there's a great work to be done, and for that reason, it's very important to reach the private investors and to talk to you about those projects. And also, it's very important also to have this dialogue and we have with the private sector and with BNDES that's with us. Well, with that information, I'd like to thank you for the invitation and all the attention that we have here. And Apex is also here for more information about the next auctions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rafael. Let's now get into the second presentation of the webinar. After this presentation, we will start our discussion panel. Let me introduce now Fabio Abrão, Director of Concessions and Privatizations at the Development Bank BNDES. Fabio, let me show your presentation.
Hi, Cesar, thanks. You are joined today by Jaroslav Benrava, the new business director of the sanitation company Aegea Saneamento, also by Pablo Sorge, partner at Mattos Filho, Carlos Leiria Pinto, the head of the IFC in Brazil, Roberto Figueiredo Guimarães, the planning and economy director at the Brazilian Association of Infrastructure and the Basic Industry, the ABDIB, and also by Felipe Pinto, the partner and the head of infrastructure at the Patria Investments. So let's get started. My first question will be for Jaroslav about the Aegea plans. So Jaroslav, after participating in major sanitation concessions auctions last year, where does Aegea see potential for expansion, new concessions, opportunities to arrange more contracts this year in the sanitation area?
Looks like Jaroslav is in mute. Okay, carry on with the next speaker so we can have some time to solve this issue. I'm sorry about this.
Okay, perfect. So the next question will be for Pablo at Mattos Filho. Pablo, with the advance of the concessions agenda in Brazil, as Rafael presented at the start of this panel, what are the segments that are likely to generate more opportunities in terms for project finance players?
Well, good morning. Good morning to all the participants here, to the panelists. It's a pleasure to be here with you. You know, when you have a very active concession program, as we are having right now, there are opportunities in many sectors. So we are expecting a lot of activity in roads, rail. That's a new sector that we expect some activity. Water and sewage, as we have seen with some of the divestments, and that also entail new financings, and some of them are project finance, and as well as airports and ports and other areas. So, you know, we are very optimistic in terms of all the sectors that will receive financing in the short, medium term. What we want to see, and I think the new development is really bringing the private capital and especially the debentures market to finance infrastructure assets in Brazil. That has started. We have, of course, everybody's aware the debentures, infrastructure debentures that has a tax benefit that helped a lot. But still, if you look the amount of funds from institutional investors and from individuals that invest in infrastructure assets, there is a long way to go. We have seen BNDES playing a very important role, and it's a pity that Fabio could not join, but I think BNDES is really helping this agenda to foster the capital markets into infrastructure financing. So BNDES has worked in a project with us as an instructor of a debentures issuance, and now BNDES is looking as a role of underwriter. That's a very interesting development to see BNDES really acting as an agent to foster debentures issuance and also anchoring and buying some of those debentures, and then hopefully that will increase the secondary market of debentures. Finally, Rogério, just to end my first answer here, I think it's important to note the new law that has passed last year, December last year. That is this new law regarding foreign exchange in Brazil. We call the Marco Legal do Câmbio. And in that law, there is a specific provision that is a very interesting one that allows for infrastructure companies that have concessions, authorizations on one hand, and exporters on the other hand, to sign, execute, and have agreements denominated in foreign currency. So the idea that you have in Brazil agreements between Brazilian parties that will be denominated in foreign currency, that's likely to attract, first, investors that are interested in coming to Brazil and knowing that the offtake will be denominated in foreign currency. So that would cover not only the debt, but also the equity side. But also it should bring international banks and lenders that are willing to finance those projects that have foreign denominated offtake agreements. So that's very clear in the energy sector, but we also hope to see that in the infrastructure sector. So for ports, for rail, we hope to see some projects that will use that new law that will enter into force by December this year, and that should also bring additional pocket of funds to infrastructure in Brazil.
Sounds good, great. Thanks, Pablo. So, Carlos, we are talking about a lot of the agenda of infrastructure concessions in Brazil. And I know that IFC has plans to structure more projects here. And can you tell us which segments would be part of this focus? You are in mute, Carlos.
My apologies.
Great.
Thank you, Rogério, and a great pleasure to be here with you, with BN Americas and all the audience. And Answering your question, a little bit of context, if I may, Rogero. Just to say that, I mean, IFC, I dare to say that as one of the most successful PPP structuring teams in Brazil, we have been for many years structuring several concessions and PPPs in different sectors such roads, urban mobility, hospitals, and more recently on public lighting. And we have a great partnership with BNDES, as well with our colleagues from the ABDIB. So we have already structured, when we consider the last 10 years, we have already structured 15 projects, which mobilize something like $8 billion. And we are now growing really fast. So we have in our hands 15 upcoming transactions, representing something like $20 billion of additional mobilization. So, I mean, we are very committed, and as already mentioned, we think that there is a huge opportunity ahead of us to continue supporting Brazil reducing the infra gap. Maybe it's important for you to know that, I mean, we have been heavily investing in Brazil as well, providing equity and long-term debt. In fact, I'm happy to say that 2021 was the best ever year for IFC here in Brazil. We have invested something like $2.8 billion. 20% of that was precisely on the infra sector, and we want to continue expanding our investments in the infra sector. So just to give you some ideas, where do we see more opportunities in Brazil, or where is IFC more focused looking forward? I always start saying that we have urban mobility, railways, and ports. I think this is there will be a huge change when it comes to urban mobility. We are already seeing some initiatives in the mobility sector. So there will be a transition to other sources of energy, the electricity for sure, but also biofuels, where Brazil is very well positioned to have a leading role, I would say, not only in the continent, but as well in we can see that FICO-FIOL project will see the light, and we would like to be a part of that project. It's really important to improve productivity in Brazil. The second one is water and sanitation. Thanks to the new regulatory framework for sanitation that has been approved in 2020, if I'm not wrong, we see a number of great opportunities for the private sector to invest in this sector through privatizations or concessions. There are a number of opportunities. We, as IFC, recently invest into projects, one with Corsan, the utility of Rio Grande do Sul, and another one here in the state of São Paulo through Desenvolve São Paulo, the state development bank. Then waste and management. I think we expect the regulatory environment for waste management and landfills to improve over time. I think there is a strong need to have better regulation in that specific sector to support more bankable projects in this sector. And the fourth, I would say, is renewable energy. We all know how relevant is the wind and solar potential here in Brazil, in zones like Ceará, but we are already focused on the green hydrogen. We see that this is going to be a very important sector here in Brazil. Brazil is very well positioned thanks to these natural conditions, as I mentioned, for instance, Ceará, And we see a number of pre-feasibility studies being conducted on this sector. So we will be supporting this development here in Brazil. And finally, to conclude about connectivity, I think if there is a lesson that we learn with the COVID is precisely how relevant is connectivity in a country. And Brazil has proved to be quite resilient, but there is a huge demand to improve connectivity across the country, across the sectors. So we think that it's important to be active in the telecommunications, in the media, and the technology, TMT sector. And in fact, we are proud to have our first investment in the data center sector occur precisely here in Brazil with Odata, that is a subsidiary. It's the majority shareholder is precisely Patria. We have a representative of Patria with us, Felipe Pinto, so maybe he can also comment on this specific sector. I will stop here. Thank you, Rogerio.
Great, great. Thanks, Carlos. Also, you shared a lot of important information and initiatives from IFC here in Brazil. So, as you mentioned also a lot about the sanitation sector, I would like to take this opportunity to address my next question to Yaroslav Menrava, the new business director of Aegea Saneamento. Yaroslav, after participating in major sanitation concessions here in Brazil last year, what's the plans of Aegea for this year? Where did the company see more opportunities this year and also for the next years?
Thank you very much for the question. I think the sanitation sector is passing through a transformation period since the first auction that we had in Alagoas. I think it was the main milestone for the change in the market for water and sanitation. And since that, we are having a lot of new opportunities in the sector, especially the ones developed by BNDES. I think BNDES and now Caixa Econômica are playing a very relevant role in the country for developing the projects. It was the main discussion that we had in the past. Not only the regulatory milestone, the framework need to be improved, but also we need to have companies like BNDES and Caixa Econômica, the development banks, structuring projects, because we need the projects to go to the market and in order to have the private participation in the sector. So we see a lot of opportunities with these banks working, the developing and the structuring of new projects. And 2022 is a year of election for the government. So we see a change in some agendas in the states, but we do believe that we are going to have new projects. And especially for this year, we see Ceará as a huge opportunity. We just won the project in Crato. It was developed by Caixa Econômica Federal, and we also have two projects being developed by BNDES, including the capital of the state, Fortaleza, for a sewage PPP. So we do believe this is a project that is going to the market this year, and Aegea will try to do the best efforts to win this project. And also we do believe that Porto Alegre will be a project for 2022. So Aegea is developing all the capabilities in order to have the capital structure to participate in these two projects during the year of 2022.
Sounds good. Interesting insights also, Yaroslav. Thanks to share this with us. And my next question will be for Roberto Guimarães at the ABDIB. Roberto, we are talking a lot about the opportunities in Brazil, but you need to remember that this year we have elections here in Brazil for the president, the state's governors, and also congressmen. Do you believe, depends on the results of the elections, in a changing the direction of the concessions agenda in Brazil, both from the side of the federal government and also from the side of states?
Oh, Rogério, okay. Good morning. First of all, it was a pleasure to stay here and my colleagues here to deal with this important issue infrastructure in Brazil. Thanks a lot to be here. The answer is, of course, not. We believe that the agenda is going to be the same. We can point 2 or 3 reasons for that, and to start the discussion. First of all, we think that it's not any ideological issue anymore. Fortunately, the governors, federal government, state governments, municipalities, and we think they have the understanding that the fiscal constraint situation, they have to look for something, and concessions are the solutions. So we really think that it's not an ideological issue anymore. It's a good deal for the future. So it depends. Let's say in 2021, states and municipalities have a huge extra revenue from tax inflation, from GDP, increased GDP, etc. We will not have this in 2022 and 2023. So the governments, the authorities, is going to have to have money to make the expenditures on health, education, security. So they have to have money for that. And if they can save money from investing in infrastructure, they can put money in the social areas. And let's say I'm sure that the wage pressure, the wage increase pressure is going to be very high 2022 and 2023 in the states and the municipalities, and also in the federal government. So they have to have money from outorgas, from the process, and to save money from investment to put money in the social areas. We are very confident that in 2023 ahead, the Greenfields project, the Brownfields project is going to run. Nowadays, ABDIB has a study called Blue Book of Infrastructure. It shows that we have today almost 500 infrastructure projects around the country. Almost 500. It's a very, very huge pipeline of the projects. Greenfield and brownfield ones. They are not going to be left in the future. We really believe it's going to maintain this process and to increase more. I have more things to say, but let's try to discuss and bring more information in the discussion.
Great, thanks, Roberto. Nice view, interesting view. And now my question is for Felipe Pinto, the partner and the head of infrastructure at the Patria Investments. So, Felipe, what is the perception of infrastructure investors regarding Brazil right now in terms of risks and the opportunities? Which segments have generated more interest from investor side, in your view?
Thank you, Rogério. Hello, and hello to everyone participating, the panelists. Thank you for the organizers for the invitation. So, Rogério, just before I address your question, just a little bit on Patria. So we are here very passionate for the topic, for the subject. We have been investing in infrastructure for the last 15 years. Currently, we have over $5 billion of assets under management just related to infrastructure. So which positions us as one of the leading investors, not only in Brazil, in Latin America, in connection with infrastructure. And Brazil continues to be the bulk of our exposure. And throughout that period, we have done more than 20 investments in all sectors of infrastructure. So we've been very active in logistics and transportation. We are large toll road operators in Brazil. We have developed one of the largest waterways operator in the continent. We have invested significantly in energy, in water in Chile, less in Brazil. Brazil continues to be a country that we look very closely, and in digital infrastructure. And we're very proud of the partnership that we have developed as a large data center operator with the IFC, and as Carlos mentioned. And besides that, we are large developers of telecom towers. So that has positioned us as one of the players that has been investing and living very intensively, you know, the ups and downs of the Brazilian market. And frankly, we remain very constructive. I mean, we have seen a lot of long-term good developments, structural developments in the sector, including the establishment of the PPI, which I think changed the way the pipeline of infrastructure projects been built. We have seen the development of the capital markets funding infrastructure projects besides the National Development Bank. We have seen projects that are market friendly in the way they are structured, and that resulted eventually in attracting for a number of sectors very interesting contenders, very interesting players. And I would refer, for instance, for the great success of the concessions of airports starting in 2017-18, bringing all of the global operators to our market. So on the long run, I remain constructive. We've seen a lot of good developments, and I agree with Roberto that I think there is today less of an issue of an ideology, because Brazil has been consistently investing much less than it should in infrastructure, much less, and clearly that space needs to be occupied by the private investment, by private investors. Otherwise, we won't be able to get there. So overall, I think we continue to see a very good market, large market. We've seen new players establishing themselves and looking into this market. On the other hand, I think we need to realize that we compete for capital with other very large markets across the globe, such as India, China, the US now launching a very large infrastructure program. So that capital is very flexible. It can go anywhere, and it can choose projects across the globe. So we need to continue to work to make projects very attractive. And I must say that we are living a very a challenging cycle today in the infrastructure market across the globe, and in particular in Brazil, that is driven mainly by the fact that we are seeing from one end a significant inflation in capex. We are seeing increasing interest rates, and obviously we are seeing sort of more aggressive assumptions in some of the projects. And this is not something that is structural, but it's a cycle. And I think the government, the legislators, the regulators need to act upon that to continue to maintain our projects competitive and to be able to attract the biggest operators and investors. So over time, I think Brazil continues to be an attractive destination, but it does require close management. I also see that by the involvement of the BNDES, the IFC, and other project structures, the dialogue between private investors and those that are structuring projects and members of the government has improved substantially, a lot over time. So there is a dialogue, but still we need to be very managing very closely those situations to continue to attract capital and avoid situations, for instance, like we have seen in the PR 381, which eventually was postponed and was unable to attract bidders for a project that potentially can be very interesting, but under the cycle that we are living through, it became a very challenging one.
Great, nice, great insights, Felipe. Thanks for that. And my next question will be for Yaroslav again. About I got a lot of questions all the time when I hold the interview about the sanitation sectors and the opportunities. And one of the main questions are about the future of this segment. What do you expect, Yaroslav, in terms of competitors, in terms of players in Brazil? Do you believe in the entrance of new players in the sanitation area in Brazil in future concessions? I'm talking about new operators, or the most likely scenario is for the entrance of investment funds in the capital of existing operators here in Brazil?
Rogério, I see from my perspective here that the market is already with new players last year. So we saw the entrance of CIMI, that is a Spanish company, the holding and the controlling group of the company. We also saw Alonda participating in the market. But in my view, the second way will be the dominant in the market. So we are going to see more investors together with the existing players for the new concessions. I do believe this will be the way that we are going to see the market established for the next year. So we saw Vinci together with Águas do Brasil. We saw in some cases other investment funds trying to enter in the sector, like Perfin and other houses. So I do believe that the existing players together with the investment funds will be the scenario for the short term. But I do believe in the long run, for the big privatization projects that we can have in the future, we can see new players like the French ones for bids like Copasa and also other companies that are already in the market but can pass through a privatization process.
Okay, great, sounds good. So Pablo, backing out to the project finance questions, I like to explore a little bit about this topic. We are seeing the engagement of BNDES to develop better the model of the so-called no recourse project financing modality in Brazil. What are the main challenges to develop this kind of mechanism here in Brazil?
Thank you, Rogério. Yes, I have been working with infrastructure finance for 15, 20 years, and I think that question always come about the non-recourse project financing in Brazil. And even a limited recourse, but really limited to the base equity or a certain cost overrun for the project, right? And to be frank, IFC and IDB, they have both played a very important role in developing the market in Brazil, and they have done that in many projects. The Brazilian commercial banks, they have played also an important role by providing bank guarantees to some projects and taking the project risk in a non-recourse basis, if you may. But one player was missing from that equation, which is exactly BNDES. So really all the efforts, even if you think about Entrevias, a project from Patria that was able to issue the debentures in a non-recourse basis. So, it was really BNDES, the main key player that was not engaging in this type of structure. I'm very happy to see that BNDES has now changed really the mindset and has started to consider structures that BNDES undertakes some of the construction risk. I think it started a little bit with the Pipa toll road, also a project from Patria. BNDES tested the waters there. Then they really dived deeper with the linha 6 of the subway, São Paulo, and also with a toll road, Mato Grosso toll road MT100. In those projects, especially linha 6, BNDES really went for a non-recourse type of structure, which is very, very important for the market. Now, in order to have a non-recourse type of structure, there are, some considerations. First of all, you need to be mindful that the project will take more time for you to finance and to mature all the discussions, right? You need to really look the construction agreement, all the project documents. You need to make sure that the risk allocation among all the parties of a project are correctly allocated or are mitigated in relation to the company and the banks. So that discussion on project documents, I think that's also a new step that BNDES took, really relying on external counsel and external consultants to review from an international standard point whether the project documents were bankable or not. And I think that's really the trend. I think we'll see, like for example, our firm has now an independent group that only does project documents, EPC agreements. So I think we'll see in Brazil much more bankable project documents, considering that the players will want this type of non-recourse structure, especially if you think about private equity firms, if you think about international sponsors, as Yaroslav mentioned, they are used to no-recourse financing. So I think this is a very good trend. I think we are seeing very interesting developments, and we are very optimistic, Rogério.
Great, thanks, Pablo. So, Carlos, now my second question for you is about the challenges to develop projects, not only in terms of a federal government in Brazil, and not only in terms of governments in south of the country, such as São Paulo or Rio Grande do Sul states. What are the challenges to develop projects in more remote states? Is there a challenge in terms of demands, or is there a challenge in terms of know-how to develop projects over there? Sorry, Carlos, are you very mute?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm so sorry.
No problem.
Back again with you. I think you are absolutely right. I mean, both on the side of the demand side, as well on the knowledge side, there are challenges. I would say that, I mean, as we have been working here in Brazil, our PPP, so we have a great experience of dealing with these different entities, ranging from the federal down to the municipal. So we have been working with, we have two great partners here in Brazil. One is BNDES, I have already mentioned that, and the second one is Caixa. So the purpose of everything that we are doing here is to share our knowledge, to capacitate those institutions and municipalities and state-owned companies to be able to acquire this knowledge and to structure these kind of projects by themselves. So we have changed recently a little bit, because in the past we were doing this work project by project. And by doing that and having scarce resources, as you can figure out and you already know, I mean, this is heavily resource consuming. So we changed or we moved to what we call programs. So this is not anymore doing project by project, but considering a program of projects. For instance, I can give an example. This is about public lighting. So we have been working with Caixa in a program to structure public lighting concessions for municipalities here in Brazil. So the initial part of the program covered 8 cities. This was a huge success. So the tendering have already been concluded. The concessions have been successfully awarded in Brazil. So we are now replicating this to an additional program. So the program is going to be extended so that it will cover 7 cities. We have just started a similar program in the health sector. This is about primary healthcare units for municipalities, teaming up again with the Caixa. And by doing that, we are transferring all the knowledge to Caixa and to the municipalities. So the purpose being that in the upcoming future, both Caixa and some municipalities will be in a position to run by themselves this kind of programs. I will stop here. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Carlos. So my next question will be to Roberto at ABDIB. Roberto, still mentioning about the opportunity in other states, not only major states as São Paulo or in terms of the federal government pipeline. So I'd like to explore it to you in terms of the opportunities in other states outside this, the so-called eixo Rio-São Paulo, and what you see room for expansion of the pipeline of projects in less populated areas of Brazil, or in those cases you are talking about the more participation of the public investment?
Oh, Rogério, another good question. But if you allowed me, I will add some answers to Pablo and Carlos' answers.
Sure, feel free.
Yeah. We are still teenagers in concessions process. I've been in both sides of the desk. I worked for the federal government. I worked for São Paulo government. I've been CFO of Viracopos Airport for 5 years. I've been CEO of a sanitation concession here in São Paulo, a private one. So we are learning. I think Carlos mentioned knowledge side. It's very important. We are teenagers and we are learning together. That's my perception. We are learning together. Federal government, state and municipality government, agencies, regulatory agencies, regulatory environments, and private sector. In the very beginning, we had a lot of asymmetry in the informations, and in the airports sector is very clear. A lot of asymmetry information, and Viracopos, São Gonçalo do Amarante, and now Galeão is going to be delivered to federal government. A lot of railroads is going to be delivered to the government. It's because we are teenagers. So I like this term to the concession. We are learning. So as Pablo said about the project finance non-recourse, Viracopos was 100% project finance non-recourse. A lot of problems, and the creditors received 100% of the debtor. There is no problem with the creditors, because the accounting structure, the creditors take the money before the concessions. So answer the question, all around the the country, Rogério, we have good projects. The factory project of BNDES is very important. Also, Caixa Econômica Federal. We have Alagoas and sanitation projects. Yaroslav is here and knows Espírito Santo, not only São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, and Minas Gerais, all the states, all the big one and the short one are running project of infrastructure, all of them. And it's very good. We have to in the four, everybody is going to run project from now on. It's more, the repeat, more, almost 500 projects, greenfield and brownfield, running today. 2023 is going to be very, very, very good of this. I used to say that it's concessions is a game. Everybody gains. The authority gains, the private sector gains, and the population gains with more quality on the service. So we are again very optimistic. To complete, I think we have to waste or to spend more time in structuring projects. If we spend more time, we will have a good project. I'm an economist. I used to structure more than 200 projects. Excel accept everything, okay? But we have to know the project, to study it, to spend more time to structuring the projects, so the project finds no recourse basis can be more usual than today. It's good for everybody.
Great, thanks, Roberto. And my second question now is to Felipe from Patria, and also my last question to this panel. Felipe, what do you see the main strategy of investment funds dedicating infrastructure in Brazil? Is to invest in the concessions contracts, or the strategy most likely looking ahead is to invest in operator companies already with contracts in their portfolios?
Right. Thanks, Rogério. And frankly, I was enjoying very much Roberto's phrase about us being a teenager. I have two myself, and frankly, teenagers can behave quite erratically and be a bit risk takers. So hopefully, we evolve quite rapidly from teenagers to adults and have more of a stabilized environment as we progress. Listen, there aren't too many infrastructure funds in Brazil, frankly speaking. I would say that there are a handful of players, and from what I have seen, it does vary a little bit. So we have seen in general players trying to associate with operators and fundamentally fund third parties projects. We have examples here, for instance, GIC as a very long-standing partner with Aegea, a few other Canadian funds associating with other players with other players in the sanitation business. So that's been the case, or Vinci now partnering with Águas do Brasil. So that's a very common model of identifying a good operator and then partnering, and then having a long-standing partnership with that player. We at Patria we came from a different perspective. We always believed that there was a lack of operators and a lot of bottlenecks. So we decided to operate ourselves a number of companies and create new platforms, as we've done in toll roads, as we've done in data centers, in waterways, in energy transportation, and that requires, you know, a bigger team, a sort of more diversified set of skills. It's not only an investment team; it's an operating team, it's a technical team. So in connection with that, we have a large team. But you know, all strategies are valid. What I see with interest more recently, with the decline in interest rates, is another asset class, which is very similar to the REITs in the US, which is, you know, infrastructure investors investing in more mature assets, providing yield. So that's a new, very interesting and new asset class that is being developed in Brazil, and I hope it keeps developing as we are able to maintain the interest rates at, you know, adequate levels.
Good, good, good. Nice, nice. Thanks, Felipe. Now I would like to say thanks to all for the interesting insights, and I'm back the word to Cesar again.
Hey, thank you very much, Rogerio. That was a very insightful conversation. I want to thank all panelists for sharing your view with the audience. I want to apologize for the difficulties we had with Fabio from BNDES. I'm talking to him to see how we can share his presentation to the audience. So finally, all BN Americas clients know this is the kind of analysis we provide with our daily content. And if you're not a BN Americas client, please visit our website and take a look at what we do. All content is now in Portuguese, English, and Spanish, so I'm pretty sure you will find there very good information for your daily activities. So again, thank you very much. It was a very good conversation. Have a nice day.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yo, bye guys.